All right, so I needed to do a completely separate video about Tesla 10xing or not. That's the reason why it wasn't in my last video at all, because honestly, there's just a lot of nuance to it. There's so much meat to get into that it just would have tripled the length of that video. So I decided to make its own dedicated video here. And you're right, guys, I should have mentioned that somewhere in my other video, but I failed to do so. So I apologize. That's my fault here. But we're here today, and you guys are going to get the truth without the hype about this exact question. Is there a 10x in Tesla or not? Which of course means some of you guys really appreciate that approach in all my videos, and some of you guys are going to be a little bit mad at me, and hey, that's okay. It's been part of my YouTube journey this entire time, so I expect nothing less. I'm completely used to it. I got blasted whenever Tesla was at $400, and I said it was way overvalued when everybody else was out there saying it's going to 700 or 1,000. The real truth without the hype was it was sitting at a PE over 1,000, so that baby was coming down whether we liked it or not. It had nothing to do with whether I was bullish or bearish on Tesla or anything else like that. Obviously, I'm bullish on Tesla, but that was just a ridiculous price to pay. And after it had that huge run up, I got blasted for saying, hey, it could trade down for years. And sure enough, here we are. It has traded down for a few years now. And that wasn't me being smarter than everybody else or having some insight or, any sort of inside information or anything else like that. I just simply applied 20 plus years of investing knowledge in this situation and understanding exactly how Wall Street works, exactly how stocks work over the long run. Now, in the short run, I have no idea what's going to happen. I had no clue. Neither does Warren Buffett. Neither does really any other investor out there. They just don't know what's going to happen in the short term. It's really impossible to make those sorts of predictions. However, when you've been investing as long as I have, you understand that valuation matters in the end, and that makes it easy to see scenarios where a stock gets significantly overvalued. Obviously at a PE of 1,000, it's way overvalued at that stage. And then more importantly, that means it's going to trade down or flat for some time as that valuation kind of starts to come back to fair value. Long-term, certain truths just hold true in the stock market, and that's all I did was apply those truths to that situation. Now, if I made this video back in January when the shares were right around 100 bucks or so, and we were gobbling up shares like crazy, I know I was, I know a lot of you guys were, I know my group members were just gobbling them up like crazy, then yeah, back then I can absolutely say a 10x it would be a 10x stock at that stage. And don't forget the sale ends tomorrow to join my group if you want to see buys like that in real time and just a whole bunch else. We don't have time to get into it today. Just check out the pinned comment and take advantage before it ends tomorrow. So at $100 per share, that makes absolute sense to me that we could see 1,000 in the future. But now we are sitting at closer to $300 per share, meaning I need almost 3 times the amount of run in the stock price in order to get that same exact 10x. So that to me is a much more murky picture than it was whenever it was at 100. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's a much taller order than it was just a few months ago. So here are the 5 reasons why a 10x from here is going to be very difficult for Tesla. And then we will discuss the truth with Tesla if it doesn't make another 10x run again. And either way, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with what I'm about to say, you need to understand that truth in order to really understand what you have with Tesla stock. So the first reason it's going to be difficult to hit a 10x is because multiples always compress as companies mature. Look, I look at a lot of those videos same way you guys do, where Tesla 2030 or Tesla 2035 or Tesla 2040 or whatever's out there. And the big flaw that I see with each one of those videos that I watch, and actually there's some great information in there, some great background, a lot of work that's gone in there. But the biggest flaw that I see is thinking that as Tesla marches its way up from, basically being close to $1 trillion company right now to the largest company in the world potentially, is that somehow Wall Street is going to pay this crazy multiple for Tesla stock when that's just not the way it works. As you kind of move from, mid cap to large cap and into that rarefied air of the 5, 6, 7 stocks that are mega cap type territory, those multiples get compressed all the way through that journey. And it's happened with every single stock. You always get a much higher multiple when you're early in your growth stage versus later in your growth stage. Now, I don't mean in terms of your ability to grow revenue later on or anything else like that. I mean in regards to going from, the number 300 stock in the world in terms of market cap to the number 1 market cap. That's the growth that I'm talking about. If you can show it to me, I would love to see it, but I've never seen the largest market cap stock in the world also traded at a crazy 120 PE or an 80 PE or something like that. It just doesn't happen. And if it does, it falls down very, very quickly shortly after that. Realistically, as they move up the chart, up the ladder, up the standings per se, possibly into that number 1 category later on, the multiple is going to get compressed from here. As you kind of model things out, looking for that 10x, using the same multiple Tesla's getting today, to me, is not a realistic way to look at it, regardless of whether they get into software, whether they get into all these other avenues that they have coming. The point being, that's not how Wall Street thinks. That's not how large investors think. And guess what? By the way, when you start getting up into those higher levels, you involve more and more larger institutional type investors, big money, big pension funds, things of that nature. And you've got to understand exactly how they think, which leads me perfectly into reason number two that it's going to be hard to 10x. And that would be market cap gets increasingly harder to gain. It's very easy to go from a 100 million to a $2 billion market cap. It's still relatively easy to go from 2 billion to 10 billion, but it's infinitely harder to go from 1 trillion to 10 trillion or 5 trillion, or even just hit your second 2 trillion or 3 trillion. It gets infinitely harder. And that's simply because the amount of capital to come into it whenever it's at, let's just say $100 million market cap, in order to double that up, is relatively easy at that lower number. There's not a lot of money has to flow into that stock in order to push it up to that next level. But you get up over $1 trillion, it takes a lot of money to push it to 2 trillion. And then of course, 2 trillion to 4 trillion takes a lot more. It just gets infinitely harder. So getting to that first trillion is much easier than getting to that second trillion, much less 10 trillion, or in this case, we need just over 8 trillion to get there. That is a lot of money that has to flow into Tesla stock and be willing to stay into Tesla stock long term. And that's really, really, really hard to do. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it can't happen. But when Apple kind of had its epic run up over $1 trillion and then almost to 3 trillion, man, to think it could go from 3 trillion to 6 trillion, which still isn't a 10x, that's a much, much, much harder proposition than it was just making that initial run that it had up. Can they get there? It's possible that they can. And same thing with Tesla. But man, it takes so much more and it is so much harder. And people are viewing this in a spreadsheet lens. And that's the reason why sometimes spreadsheets are flawed and why models don't work all the time. And a lot of those other things like that we obviously saw last year, none of the models freaking work. They all broke because you can't account for the fact that more money capital has to run in. It looks nice and linear on a spreadsheet. Hey, Tesla does this. Well, people bought it at this price, so they're going to buy it at this price. It's not how it works, because you got more money that comes in, and the further out you go in terms of needing larger and larger chunks of money, the more and more conservative that big money gets. They're not risky. They're not piling into Tesla stock when it was a $100 million market cap. They just weren't even touching stocks like that. However, they'll happily pile the money into Apple, who's nice, mature, steady, and already there. And you see how hard it is to move that from a $3 trillion market cap to a $5 trillion market cap, much less an $8 trillion market cap like Tesla's going to need. Oh yeah, and by the way, you generally, to get that money to come in, you need polished management, which, as much as I love Elon and I think he's the driver behind all this, he's not polished the way Tim Cook is. Those are all things that you have to factor in that a spreadsheet just can't see, it can't figure out, and it can't know. And there's no way to evaluate that. But they're all important in terms of moving that thing up the market cap scale. And the third reason why it's going to be hard for Tesla to 10x is that everybody is assuming FSD, A, is going to be allowed anytime soon, and B, that it won't be heavily regulated, which both of those I think are false. I think Tesla's FSD is eventually going to be allowed. I agree completely, but it is going to have to jump through so many regulatory and, at the state, local, and federal level. And it's just going to take a lot of time, a lot more time than what people think. And I still, in terms of the thesis behind it, I look at FSD now and I'm like, okay, I have the money to buy a Tesla. If I was going to buy a Tesla, I'm sure as heck not paying the price that Tesla's charging for that right now in regards to FSD. It's not worth it to me at all to spend an extra $10,000 on a vehicle for FSD. It's just not. And I think most people are going to balk at that. Think about your car, whatever car you bought last. If they're tacking an additional $10,000 onto the price of that vehicle for something that is years away from possibly being legal, much less actually used, a lot of people, even though they may say, I would buy it, I think the vast majority of folks buying new vehicles are not adding that $10,000 add-on. Maybe I'm wrong and it could be a smash hit. I would not be surprised by that at all. But I have another fear with FSD that nobody wants to talk about, but it's absolutely the reality. And that is, if FSD kind of becomes more of a safety thing, kind of like think back to airbags back in the day, Tesla's going to be forced to share that with everyone for free. They're not going to get compensated for that. It's going to be, hey, I could see a scenario to where the government says, hey, we're going to allow FSD, but you have to share the tech and everything behind it, and all the data that Tesla's been collecting to put them miles ahead of the competition, which is 100% true. They're going to force them to say, hey, turn all that over so that way we can legalize it, so that way everybody can do this safely. Now, obviously, I hope they're able to strike deals ahead of time and they're able to kind of get ahead of this a little bit and start drawing in revenue from everybody else, which would be great. But to put that outside of the realm of possibility, especially with the political environment here in the US, I think that's very, very naive at best. So a lot of times when I think about FSD, I'm just not sure it's the massive opportunity that everybody puts it out there as. I agree, it's a large opportunity, but I'm not sure I buy fully into the fact that it's going to be this massive opportunity that's just going to bring trillions of dollars into the pockets of Tesla. There's just a lot of political, regulatory, and more importantly, customer accepting, that I'm not sure are nearly as much of a shoe-in as a lot of the YouTubers and a lot of the videos out there make you think it's just a complete shoe-in and it's just guaranteed. You've already seen the timelines for this get completely blown out of the water. It's going to be years into the future, despite the fact that it was coming next year for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now. So don't be surprised if we see some of these things hindered up. Now, obviously, if it doesn't, definitely helps our case in terms of getting that 10x out of Tesla. But if any of those stickler points, regulation at the state, local, or federal level, and then of course the customer themselves balking at the price point with it, if any of those things kind of go wrong, it really puts a hole in that 10x thesis. The fourth reason why it's going to be hard to 10x from here, because it assumes all the other business lines are also successful as well. I've seen very few models where people were not actually including all the different avenues that Tesla's looking into being successful. Almost all of them have some varying degree of success with all those different deals, and that's just not how it's going to work in practicality. No company has all hits and no misses. They just don't. Apple doesn't, Microsoft doesn't. Nobody has that sort of track record. So to think Tesla's going to have that now is not true. And they've had failures in the past as well. So that's, again, another assumption that's kind of works in those models to create that 10x in the future. However, whenever I kind of back up and I kind of take a bigger picture look here, I kind of see that, hey, no company has ever had 100% success rate with their products. So why am I all of a sudden applying that to a thesis with Tesla? It's just not realistic. Now, which ones are going to work, which ones aren't, nobody knows. Who knows? He likes to aim big, and part of aiming big means you're going to have some massive hits, and you're also going to have some massive misses. So for me, you've got to factor in some misses into this. That's going to make it harder to 10x. And the fifth reason why it's going to be hard for Tesla to 10x from here is because a company having multiple 10x's in the first place is very rare. And guess what, guys? Tesla has already had multiple 10x's already. That doesn't mean another one's impossible or anything else like that. But unless you're a stock from back in the 80s or 70s or something like that, with all that timeline behind you, it becomes incredibly hard to get a 10x anytime soon for another time after you've already had multiple in the first place. You can go back and look through the history of the stock market, guys, and I challenge you to find somebody with, 5 10x's during that time. It's just very, very, very hard, very, very, very rare. And that doesn't mean Tesla can't be that rare company, but they got to get themselves there first. And it's just going to be a difficult road to hoe from here, especially given where they started from and where they're at right now. That is an incredible feat, to say the least. Now, after all you guys are done blasting me down in the comments and everything else, let's all come back here. Let's talk about what happens and what the truth is behind Tesla if we don't get another 10x. I'm not saying we will or we won't. I'm just saying it's going to be extremely hard from here right now. So if we don't get that 10x, here's the simple truth about Tesla. It is still a great investment for the future, guys. I don't need Tesla to 10x in order to make me a lot of money in the future, because there's no point in banking on 100x pulling me out of whatever situation I'm in or creating my wealth for me, because I know that's not reality in terms of wealth building. In terms of actual return from my investment, if Tesla just 5x's over the next 10 years, that's an incredible investment, an incredible return on investment. And there's not going to be too many investments that beat Tesla during that time frame. There's going to be very, very few, just a handful that may beat Tesla during that time frame. So I don't need a 10x. I don't need half of a 10x in order for it to be a great investment for me. So that right there is the truth you have to understand, is it doesn't matter whether or not Tesla 10x is from here or not. It can still be a great investment with or without a 10x. It does, of course, it's better if you get the 10x, absolutely. But if you don't get it, it's okay. It doesn't matter one way or another. It's still a great investment long term. And if you aren't too mad at me and you want to see all my buy and sell alerts at real time, see my watch list complete with price targets, you want to take 5 courses for free, you want to use our stock analyzer tool completely for free, you want to be a part of the best 6, 7, and 8 figure Discord out there, you want to slide into my DMs, jump on our live Q&As, you want access to 3 to 5 videos every week that just get released to our members there. Make sure you take advantage of the sale that's going on right now for my group before that expires, because the price goes up, and just see if it's right for you. At least check out the pinned comment. And click this video here if you want to see exactly what I'm buying in this market, and click here to see my exact plan for this market. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.